I'm Alexa, and before you jump off, we are not going to be talking about recent decisions from SCOTUS. Okay, so the Supreme Court of the United States, SCOTUS, SCOTUS, has been around since we established our country, and three separate but equal branches of government. And you will understand why I paused when I said that. The judiciary was set up, and the Supreme Court is the final say in the judiciary. And it has been there since we have had a Congress and House of Reps and Senate, and then the executive branch and the judiciary. They have made mistakes. Our system of government is not perfect. It is not perfect because we are human, and we are not perfect. There is not a single perfect human out there. We all make mistakes. How we handle our mistakes and how we try to fix our mistakes says a lot about who we are, more than the fact that everyone makes mistakes. These decisions by SCOTUS, you will almost assuredly have heard either the name of it or a key phrase that came out of the decision that a lot of people will have heard. I will leave a link in the description. I'm not going to talk about every case. The link is to 9 of the worst decisions. It was published, I think, over a year ago. It doesn't take into account some of the ones that happened last year. It definitely doesn't touch on anything this year. Now, some of the things, the ramifications of these decisions can be felt pretty quickly, but a lot of the things you have to have some time to see how it actually works out. I will hopefully remember to come back to that point when we get to one of the... We're going to start at the oldest and then go down to some of the newer ones. So the very first one, and when I was thinking about bad decisions, the name of this came to mind. And for whatever reason, I wasn't able to say, okay, but what did it actually do? But I knew it was a bad one. So this one is Dred Scott v. Sanford. Now, a lot of the times, this is just called the Dred decision. And that is D-R-E-D, but it's bad. This decision essentially legalized slavery and overturned laws that freed slaves. This was decided in 1857, and around that time, there was something called the Missouri Compromise, where politicians at the federal and state level, they were trying to come up with a solution to this ongoing social unrest. I mean that's what it was. There were the states that still had slavery, and there were the states that had outlawed it. There were the former slaves, the free slaves who had managed to escape. There was the claims of former slave owners who wanted those freed slaves back. There were slaves who wanted to become free, obviously. There was a whole, if I remember correctly, we didn't have... I don't believe any of the states west of Missouri were officially states. It was the Wild West still at the time. And the Missouri Compromise, if this is the right thing that I'm thinking about, this was sort of a way to say that slavery would not be allowed in the Wild West as new territories and states were set up. I might be wrong on that. I'm not the expert on it. But this was a decision. What Dred Scott did was it essentially nullified all of this political compromise that had been going on, and it set things back to what the heck? Well, what now? There are essentially 2 ways for a bad Supreme Court decision to be overturned. One is a new case goes up to the Supreme Court, and they essentially rule the opposite way and overturn a previous ruling. Now, historically, the Supreme Court and all of the justices throughout time have been very hesitant to overturn precedent, is what they call it. Once a case is decided, there is there are other things that are built on top of that. So the lower courts now take what the Supreme Court took, and they decide a whole slew of cases that are just at that level, right? They never make it up to the Supreme Court. They don't need to, because the judge will say, per this ruling by the SCOTUS, this is the result. And that establishes over time a precedent that you're not even going to sue over a certain thing because you know that you will lose it based on this precedent that the Supreme Court justices decided in this case. When the Supreme Court overturns one of their own decisions, a historical decision, there is obviously two things that happen. One, it now calls into question every single case that was ever decided using the original decision. And two, it opens the door very, very wide for scrutiny of why are they overturning a precedent of a decided case. Historical, completely settled, shouldn't be touched law. Now, we know, if you have watched my Constitution series, my little handy-dandy pocket Constitution, I did 5 videos. If you haven't watched them, please do go see them. We know that 2 things. The Founding Fathers actually understood that whatever they made for themselves at the time would not have decided everything. It would not have the answers to everything, and that society will evolve and change over time, and there needed to be a way where things they couldn't even dream of would need to be legislated, that they need to be regulated in some way. And so our Constitution has a way to add to it or detract from it. We have seen that with the Prohibition Amendment and then the repealing of Prohibition. So those are, the amendments is where you can add or detract things. That is the second way to overturn a decision. This decision, the Dred Scott decision, was overturned by the 13th and 14th Amendment. The 13th Amendment outlawed slavery, and the 14th Amendment granted citizenship to people born in the U.S. So if you are born on U.S. soil, you are a U.S. citizen. This is quite literally black and white in our Constitution. People born in the U.S. It's a little blurry. Sorry, I'm having trouble figuring it out. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. Supreme law of our land. Now, there are cases going on right now because the current administration believes that they can overturn an amendment with an executive order. The only way to overturn an amendment, as outlined in our Constitution, our supreme law of our land, is to pass another amendment. Any decision to the opposite effect of something that is being done that is not his power, president is a man, it needs to be struck down. The courts know this. They've done it to other presidents in the past. I don't know why there's any questions about this. I said I wasn't going to talk about current ones, but we'll see how there is ongoing litigation, so it's not the final say, but a recent decision did come down on that. Let's move on. Now, the page I will share with you does have a bunch of things. I'm going to skip over. I'm not going to talk about all of them. I'm going to speak about the ones that I had on my mind. So the next one, I didn't remember the name of this one, but there are 3 key words that came out of this decision in 1896. So this was after the Civil War. This was after slavery was abolished. This was where states especially southern states, were trying to ensure that white voices had more power. They were trying to ensure they could get money for every person who lived in their state, but only have white men vote, and really have a societal way of keeping former slaves in a certain sort of class. The three words that came out of Plessy v. Ferguson in 1896 are separate but equal. This is why I kind of caught myself at the beginning, as I knew this was coming. So we do have the three separate but equal branches of government, right? Is it a perfect system? No. Does the stuff I'm about to say about separate but equal for laws also relate to what we have in our branches of government? I don't know. I think there's something there to be explored. I think it's very difficult to say yes or no. I think that we have to have we have to have power split up. And I think that's the difference, is that this decision in Plessy v. Ferguson was not about splitting power into separates so that they could balance each other. This was about stealing power into one section and then refusing entry to other people. So separate but equal quite literally was, if you have public restrooms, you can have one for blacks and one for whites, which we know lasted quite a long time. So it was actually 1954, Brown v. Board of Education, that this separate but equal ended up being overturned. It really was. This was a Supreme Court decision. So this was a Supreme Court decision that did overturn 54 plus 4, 58 years of precedent, established case law of separate but equal. Now, the question in Plessy v. Ferguson was different from the Brown v. Board of Education. This was really the equal rights and whatnot going on for education. That was a bad decision, Plessy v. Ferguson. Bad one. All right. It probably also had unintended consequences, because separate but equal wasn't just black v. white. It wasn't just former slaves versus former slave owners. It also was used to justify discrimination against certain immigrants. I mean, the Irish at one point, there would be signs in stores saying no Irish apply, like position, jobs available, no Irish apply. Like there was, it was used to justify other stuff throughout history as well. So, good thing separate but equal is gone. All right. This one you may not have heard of. This is Buck v. Bell, and it was in 1927. This decision said that forcing the sterilization of people who were deemed to have an intellectual disability, that it was okay. The problem is that, one, people have autonomy, self-autonomy. We all have a right to self-autonomy. You cannot cross that line and say some people don't, because then nobody has that right anymore. They can force anyone to have any procedure at any time. The other problem with this is that it was very easy to have, especially women, labeled as having an intellectual disability of some sort. They would say, I think the term was hysterical. It was they used it as a medical term, and it was used against any woman who had a backbone, right? They would have teenage girls whose parents thought they were being unruly and weren't, falling in line with what their house rules were, and they would have a doctor label them as hysterical and force them to be sterilized. It's horrific when you truly look at what happened to so many innocent people because of this decision. This one is just horrific. It's one of the ones I wouldn't remember the name, and I might forget the name even after this video, but this decision was bad. This decision was never actually formally overturned, but there were, similar to the last one we talked about, there was another case that this website does call out, Skinner v. Oklahoma, and essentially that did establish the fundamental right to procreate. So the eugenics argument, again, bodily autonomy it's right. We have a right to decide what we want to do and when we want to do it, and that includes whether we want to have children or not. Now, when another decision comes out that doesn't directly overturn a previous decision, but enough cases are decided for the new decision that weakens the argument, the old case kind of, it's there, but it's like it's nullified, even though it wasn't actually overturned. So, to my knowledge, they don't cite Buck v. There's no one out there citing Buck v. Bell as that they can sterilize anyone they deem mentally, intellectually disabled. The Korematsu v. United States in 1944, that also has never been overturned. That was essentially the Supreme Court justifying or greenlighting the racial segregation of Japanese Americans during World War II. That case is being cited by certain factions today to justify certain things that are going on within the past 6-7 months. And while our current Chief Justice, John Roberts, did apparently rebuke the Korematsu decision in 2018, it hasn't actually been overturned, and, well, I have real strong personal opinions on John Roberts. We won't get into today. Now, the last one, well, not the last one, the second to last one I'm going to talk about. The Bush v. Gore 2000 decision. What happened? And this one is one I'm old enough to remember. There were discrepancies in Florida, and it was close enough that these discrepancies could switch the winner of the electoral votes, the Florida electoral votes, from Bush to Gore. And if that happened, I believe it meant Gore would have won the presidency. It might be there was another state that was being counted, but the Florida one got... I'm pretty sure it was that. It was like, if they had actually recounted and investigated the discrepancies, and then the other argument here was that the larger areas, generally metro areas where a lot of people live, they have more people, they take longer to vote, to count the votes, obviously. It's easier to count 100 votes than 1,000 votes, right? It's easier to count 10,000 votes than 100,000 votes. The problem with this decision, where they said you have to stop counting now, was it unfairly impacted the larger population areas that historically lean Democrat, or were leaning Democrat at the time. I know Florida is more of a Republican state at this point. So by stopping that count, not only were they disenfranchising voters, they were essentially greenlighting that there were discrepancies. We don't care. You can have discrepancies, whatever. Like, maybe someone did cheat down there. We don't know. They forced them to stop counting and investigating it. We don't know, right? This decision was a very, very bad one. The reason that I think it is bad is not necessarily that by letting the count go on, Bush still could have won, right? He still could have won. It could have been found that there wasn't enough of a swing. He still could have won, right? But by letting the vote go on, what would have happened is there would have been more faith in the fact that the count was redone, it was finished. By stopping it, the Supreme Court injected themselves into a very partisan thing. It was decided by conservative justices, which has been a turning point in the downfall in trust of SCOTUS that has been absolutely put into overdrive in recent years. As people are thinking, like, this is a very politicized court. They didn't decide on the merits of the case, on the one person, one vote right in our Constitution. They went with this arbitrary date that didn't actually, like, what's more important, meeting a date or getting it right? And a lot of people saw this decision as they don't want it to be right. They just want to get Bush the win. They're sticking to this date, and they don't care if he didn't actually win. So there was a lot of distrust that came out of this decision, and I do think that was a turning point and sort of a downfall, especially with my generation, of distrusting this. Why would we trust them when it was very easy for them to say, it's a fundamental right, one person, one vote, it has to be counted correctly. What's an extra week, right? Or get more people in there to get it counted in time. I think they could have decided this differently. This has not been overturned, and I do think that there's probably some issues still with that going on that may not have come up yet, but there's the potential for it to affect another election and for issues to come up from it. Okay, now here's the last one I was going to talk about. And this one I have talked about possibly on this channel, I'm not sure, but this one I have talked about in a lot of places, a lot of times, in a lot of ways. This is absolutely, through probably last year or the year before, the most egregious decision of our lifetimes. And there is a very, very strong reason for that. Citizens United via the FEC in 2010. This decision, again, decided, if I remember correctly, by conservative justices in the majority at the time, said that spending on political campaigns is considered free speech. The problem is, being rich does not mean that you should have more say in the political process. Our Constitution, the supreme law of the land, says one person, one vote. It does not say if you're rich, you can essentially buy votes by using psyops and mass marketing and essentially brainwashing people to vote the way you want them to. The consequences and the effects of this decision have been as grave as the people who said it should have been the opposite decision warned us about. Every non-partisan, non-political entity out there who has studied this decision and the effects of it has said this is a bad decision. This is not giving people freedom. This is 100% leading to corruption. This is money corrupts. Money absolutely corrupts. Every single one of us knows that money can and does corrupt more often than it doesn't. We see this today by every single person in that Congress and Senate who has said they would never, ever vote to cut Medicaid, who has taken money from billionaires and their super PACs where they hide who their actual donors are behind super PACs. They've taken that money and now they've just voted to cut Medicaid so badly. It is the biggest cut to a social program, from what I read, from what I understand, from all the data I have. It is the biggest cut to a social program in the history of this country. It's egregious. And it is because they have taken the money and they have voted how the people who paid them told them to. Now they will say they didn't, that they made up their own mind and they chose it, and that's all well and good, and I believe they did that. Just like Justice Clarence Thomas says he didn't become more conservative after becoming friends with Harlan Crow or something, whatever his name is, the billionaire who's been gifting him vacation after luxury home, paying for his nephew's like insane private school tuition, buying his mother's house and then letting her live there rent-free. You don't think he got corrupted by the views of that person who never asked him to vote a certain way, but absolutely made it known in one way or another how that decision would affect him? If he wasn't corrupted, he will be one of the first people in history to not be corrupted by that type of behavior. It corrupts everyone. The fact that he hid what was happening tells you he knows it's wrong. Because if it's not wrong, why would he have hidden it? One of the absolute best ways for anyone who is going into a position of power to help protect themselves from becoming compromised, and listen, this goes for people like me who went from being a teammate to a manager, or being an individual contributor to a manager level, right? The minute you get power, you have certain things that are going to be put in front of you, and they're tests in a way of like, are you going to do the right thing? And it's not necessarily an intentional test by people. Sometimes it is. Most of the time it's just, this is life. This is what's going to happen. The absolute best way we as people can make sure that we are less likely, not inoculated from, but less likely to make bad decisions and become more corrupted over time, to push that line of like compromising our values a little bit more. The best way is to make things public, to be as transparent and open as we possibly can and say, this is what I'm doing and this is why. Most politicians will not do that. Now, I understand that there is some stuff that cannot be publicized for national security reasons or whatever, but let's be real. The majority of stuff that politicians do and say, and the meetings they take, the people that they, lobbyists get a bad name. That is because this Citizens United decision and the rules around lobbyists have now favored big money having their own lobbyists on the Capitol Hill. Lobbyists also include people who are working for free, nonprofits that go up and try to, for example, the disability rights advocates. They are often severely underfunded, doing things pro bono. There's no money, but do they get the meetings with the politicians? Not with a lot of them, because the people who get money from donors, big money donors, well, now there's this sort of expectation that, oh yeah, we donated to your campaign. Can we talk sometime? It happens. And unfortunately, it happens throughout life. And we are, as humans, when people are nice to us, we are more likely to like them back and to want to help them. This is just a psychological thing that happens to us as humans. Money in politics. I have been looking recently, it's not like the past week or anything, but like over the past year or two, I've really been studying how people run for office, how it works, how much you need to even start running for office. So when you start a campaign, even for like a county position, you have to finance it yourself. There's nothing there to help you. There is something, I believe, at least in Iowa, there's something at the state level if you're running for a state Congress or state Senate position. But it's a little stipend and you have to pay out of pocket and then they pay you back. So it's not the way our system is rigged right now, with Citizens United allowing massive amounts, that one man could spend, $250 million on the last presidential election. One person spent $250 million. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And you think that that doesn't have severe, terrible ramifications for our democracy? It does. This decision and the ensuing 15 years since, and however long this takes us to hopefully reverse and fix this, however many more years this is going to take, this period in history will be, like, there will be scholars who are dedicated to just the ramifications of this decision and what has come after it. It is that bad. And probably in another 150, 200 years, some other country in the future is going to make a stupid decision like that, because no one will be alive who has lived through the ramifications of this decision, which is what we're seeing with some other stuff going on right now. And they will have the exact same corrupt, less free and fair, severely influenced elections. It's not about policy anymore. It's about who can raise the most money. And they raise the most money by catering to the billionaires. That's how it goes. This was a long one. I appreciate you being here. I will leave the link so you can check out some of the other really bad decisions. In a year or two, I think that definitely one from last year is going to be on this list. And a couple of the ones from this year will end up being on this list as well in the future. And it might be next year, it might be 5 years, it might be 15, but we'll see the ramifications of the really terrible decisions that have come out this year. It's really weird, like, all the ones on this list are kind of spread out, where it's not the same Supreme Court that chose these terrible decisions. The current makeup of this Supreme Court will also be a special class at some point. How can 6 individuals be that bad? Make that many wrong decisions? Yeah. Well, if you made it this far, thank you. Let me know if there's any decision that sticks in your mind that we didn't discuss. And yeah, I'll see you on the next one. Have a good night.